But we are talking about the intersection of transportation, housing, and development because we don't work and live in silos. All of these things are interacting and to make our lives and our day-to-day what they are. And so as we continue to talk about revitalization in our corridors, which are essential to the health of our communities, you'll hear a discussion about the intersection of all of those things.
Wonderful. Thank you, Brittany. Good morning, everybody. Thanks again to all the people who are making this conference happen. It's this really amazing discussion that we just had, and hopefully get to build on some of those things in this next one. My name is Peter Eccles. I work for an organization called Link Houston. We focus on the intersection of transportation and how it can help people have access to economic opportunity, and housing is absolutely tied up into that. I'm the policy director there. I've been there for about 2 years. Previous to that, I was one of the people who was giving the people in the last panel a hard time in the planning department. More focused on transportation than the development side, but I'm a planner. That's my background and the lens that I come to this work. I'll let the rest of the panel introduce themselves. Pass it off to Jeff.
I'm Jeffrey Kaplan, and I'm from Houston, and I'm a partner and a co-founder in a company called Concept Neighborhood. And what we're doing is sort of a market-based approach to urban planning. We've sort of turned the scarcity of trail-based, walkable, authentic corridors into a business case, and we're figuring it out. And I'm excited to share where we're at and what we're hoping to do with our vision. And my background is I'm a social entrepreneur and a retail merchant, so I've done a lot of third place, publicly driven, community driven hospitality retail projects, and am really passionate about creating more third places and really a third place neighborhood. So the project is sort of meant to be kind of a publicly driven attempt at creating that sort of community.
Nikki Knight, the Greater Southeast Management District. I'm the district program manager. We operate as a subset of the state of Texas to govern about 32 square miles of the city of Houston. We function a lot like a chamber and the management of a small city. We provide services above city standards. We have been around for about 22 years. And in this work, you're navigating all the things that Peter tries to stop, I'm just kidding. All the things that deal with building community and building connectivity and creating a sense of place. I've been doing this work for about 9 years now. Previously, strategy, strategic operations, accounting, all the things, right? But the joy in this work is being able to sit in rooms like this to talk to people who are looking at ways to solve problems. That's how I approach this work, is what problem are we attempting to solve, whether it be transportation, whether it be housing, economic development, workforce development. It's all about solving problems and coming to a good solution. I'm going to be here. Thanks for having me.
Jason Hyman, broker owner and principal planner for the office, Jason T. Hyman. We focus more so on infield development, supporting infield developers, brokerage, and revitalization strategy. So really big on things that are going on in Third Ward and communities like it across the city. Most of my background has been in public-private finance, typically affordable housing development. Now focus similar to Jeff on more market-based urban planning. Our niche kind of focus is not just trail along the Columbia Tap, but also corridors like Emancipation Avenue. So really focus on kind of like an incremental approach to commercial, as well as more than missing middle housing types that we talked about earlier, really putting different models in the market to take a little bit of the risk out of it for other folks to help talk about early come behind. So.
Wonderful. Thanks, everybody. I want to start with a quick icebreaker for the panelists. Just real quick, what was the last time, think of the last time you went somewhere in Houston and you didn't drive to get there? How did you get there? And where did you go?
I don't think I have, you know?
I don't own a car. So I walk and bike everywhere I go. So I mean, to work yesterday.
So here, was the last time?
I Ubered here.
Okay.
Today. I Ubered.
Last time you took metro or you walked or you biked somewhere, where was it?
I get some metro rail in town throughout the week.
And then Nikki.
I was a small child, in the backseat of my mom's car. I was kidding. I think the last time I used an Uber to maybe visit some businesses along the corridor, so I didn't have to drive. We have an Uber program with the district, and so I wanted to let them know what we had, and also utilize it so they could see how easy it is.
Gotcha.
And that was probably about 3 weeks ago.
Okay.
That was a challenging question.
Rodeo
In
downtown.
Houston. But what I'll say is, one of the things that people kind of think about it with me is when I'm in this area, you probably see me pull up on a little electric bike, even if I'm showing housing. So, if I'm in the area, yeah, I'm not walking, but I'm usually on a scooter or a bike.
Gotcha. All right, so mentioned some places that were accessible to get to without driving. They're sort of precious few in Houston, but they do exist. Now think to that place. If you were redeveloping that property right now, what does chapter 42 say that you can do, that you have to do with that property?
Yeah, I was gonna say, so interesting enough, we're working on some different sites along Emancipation, so places where I'm biking and things like that. And while, at least from my perspective, there isn't anything that I feel like is very restrictive to putting something there that's great to walk to, necessarily. I think it's more about having an area that works together and what you can walk to. Just meaning, we don't have zoning here. There's no form-based codes or anything like that. If we take Emancipation, it's not like a zone district. Or more importantly, there's no real physical vision that people can go to and say, this is what it should look like. So we tend to get like all kind of stuff, just along the corridor, houses, big apartment complexes, and things like that. That's more by choice and market driven, right? But it doesn't promote us wanting to walk up and down that corridor. So,
Yeah, I think what. But do I have to speak about chapter 42 or can I just talk?
Or just this is more of an icebreaker, like that specific property, if you were redeveloping it, do you have to provide parking to that place? Do you, what else does the city want you to do in that? We'll get to all the other stuff later, just to set the stage.
So much of our strategy is sort of around, creating some singular, unique places that make you want to walk there. Where there's one of one, and it's not, it exists of that neighborhood, of that place. And our projects are in no parking neighborhoods, and we're really, using the zero parking to make these buildings come to life. So historic buildings.
Yeah. Here, this Emancipation is a transit-oriented development corridor. So we will get some parking relief here. So there's nothing there that chapter 42, I feel like, prevents us from making great places here. But that's not widespread across.
Yes, definitely.
Peter, I'll just say, while it's a good thing, the flip side of that is people that don't live here, right, that come to frequent.
Right.
They're not used to, the no parking, inaccessible streets, residential parking restrictions. And so it creates a issue on the business side because people are looking to work and to earn money, and their patrons can't come or won't come because it's difficult to access.
Absolutely. So I'll just back up a little bit of when people hear of Link Houston as a focused on transportation organization, they think, oh, you want like a bike lane on every street, you want like a public transit line or something like that. And yes, in some cases, but hold it, like, back up a second. Why do we care about these things? Link Houston was formed a little under 10 years ago, by folks who were involved in other nonprofit organizations, community development, workforce development, first-time home buyers, those ALICE populations that were mentioned earlier, asset limited, income constrained, but employed. And what all of those organizations were finding is that all these programs that were available, people couldn't necessarily get to those. The burden of owning a car in those populations is astounding. It's about, like, recent research says it's about $12,000 a year. If you're struggling to pay your bills, then that's a massive issue. Houston's got this reputation for affordability, certainly less and less so in recent years, but it really starts to erode once you factor in the transportation cost that people need to take on. Link Houston did some research into where is the housing available to folks that really need that have those affordable rates. And we have a lot of places that are well connected but expensive, and then a lot of places that are cheap that are not particularly well connected. And that sweet spot of the quadrant is really important. So
this stuff doesn't work all over the place. It works where there is investment in mobility and transit and bike lanes. Like, so we have the first project I did in the corridor was this restoration of these old 1890s bungalows, and it was 2 bungalows converted to 7 micro units. I mean, each room has its own bathroom, and they're well designed except for 2. And we have it's like they're around the courtyard that some other friends did where the fire station is. And of the 7 units, 1 person has a car, and it's been like that like, I think there's a humongous opportunity and a big misalignment of just supply for people that want this lifestyle around micromobility. I mean, even if it's like 0.1% of the market, that's thousands of units that no one is delivering today that work in these sort of conditions. And it really is good economics. I mean, like, if you think about the cost of podium parking space today is like 35,000 of parking space. And that's a straight line amortization into somebody's rent. Like, that's a couple $100 a month that somebody doesn't have an option to choose to pay or not pay. If they rent any new apartment building in Houston, they are forced to pay for that cost of parking. So, like, we think there's a way to create really inspired courtyard style apartments where, they are using the law that was passed under our previous mayor to give us market-based parking. The challenge is the banking. The financing does not, there's no lenders yet that have lent outside of a downtown in a post-World War II city like Houston to those parking standards, those TOD market-based parking standards, which say, we believe that there's a population of Houstonians that want this lifestyle, but you still have to get a bank to do it.
Yeah.
So there's a huge opportunity. Some bank is going to say, oh my God, that is like the greatest startup. Let's start a bank focused on these laws. Like, somebody's going to leave a bank and go to the Greater Houston Community Foundation and pull some capital to start an urban impact bank, and it's going to kill it because there's such a demand for this. I mean, there really is. Like, it just takes an inspired banker. What's that?
Yes, who knows how to sort of bank.
Yeah, somebody's going to do it. Like, I'm ready to talk to anyone who wants to do it. Because I mean, there's a humongous need. Like, it will soar. And Houston can lead a national trend because of our zoning. Like, that bank will scale because Houston, our role on the world stage is that we help you figure out what the next pattern of development is faster. Like, for better or worse, mostly worse.
I mean, there's probably gonna have to be some risk taking on our end to get there, though. I think. I know for us, like, we aren't getting away with no parking. I know you guys are, kind of eliminating it together. So
no, we're not eliminating.
No.
No. We can't take Houston's cars away.
Yeah. So
I've tried. No, you can't do that.
Yeah. So no. We I think taking kind of a step and having some parking, and getting something done, you make it, get the banks on board and just kind of incrementally step it towards what we really need it to be. Absolutely.
And I'll say this, one of my mentors, Janice Jamel Jarvis, one of the old realtor broker people in the East area, really ahead of her time. She used a model, courtyard, style apartments was not really a thing back in those days. So back in like 2000, 2001, she had a property on Fagan that had about 6 little independent cottages, and it really was a community, its own community, and a building around the corner that is still there today for the workplace. And they had a parking lot. And so what she did was, as a part of the parking requirement, for any of these properties that she had adjacent to the building, it was a shared parking opportunity. And so the building's operational hours were 9 to 5, right? But residents, there was no overnight parking for the tenants of the building, but the residents could park in this parking lot. And so she was able to get around some of the parking requirements by using a shared parking model. But the difference is she had leverage, right? With, being a developer, being a broker, being able to know the rules and leveraging the assets that she had and the partnerships that she had. So I think that's another opportunity for us to consider, just adjacencies, right? Even if I live in a space where there's 0 parking or, very minimal parking, and I have a car, what is the relationship with the developer and the adjacent businesses to be able to apply some of that parking?
Piggyback off.
Yeah.
No, that's-
Piggyback off one another.
But ironically, actually, we're overparked because of this incrementalist approach. We have, there's surface land, but the plan is to be under, in the future, like, so we can watch the market as it's evolving. But we'll replace, the idea is to build district level garage parking instead of, the front loader townhome, where each home has their own parking space. Blocks the driveway, blocks the sidewalk. Like, but it's sort of both today.
Yeah.
I think that example that you brought up, Nikki, is like almost a micro version of the planning for like a small sector of a neighborhood. What are the collective needs of all of these different properties? What's the overlap? Where can they take advantage of each other on another time? So the importance of planning in all this, of corridor planning and how these things are going to develop over time is absolutely clear. Just wondering if folks could speak towards a plan that they've been a part of recently that they thought went well in this respect or had some shortcomings.
Like a broader plan.
Yeah.
On this. Wow.
I can speak of 32 square miles.
Even the city signs?
Yeah, really any to start the conversation.
Okay.
Yeah, parking is a thorn in my side,
Mhm.
both of them, right? But what I realize is that because parking is such a need in that area, the solution has been more difficult to find because one, the district doesn't own anything, right? We don't own any land. But years ago, we had a public-private partnership with the Children's Museum. So their whole garage is a byproduct of the work that we do collectively. But across the city or across the district, we don't have much space to leverage those opportunities. And we are looking at a space down the street of Gray to do another parking garage situation. But again, at 30,000, 35,000 a spot, it's still limited, right? And so what can you do to solve this problem? You put in the power of choice. People are able to bike, to Uber, or to use microtransit, but that's not everybody's preference. And so, we're Texas, we're Houston, we're big trucks and, loud cars. So when we are looking at spaces like along Alameda, where, TxDOT, we shut down the road from 4 to 6, right? Where do those cars go? They go into the residential streets. But what happens on the residential streets? It's no parking or residential parking permits. And so again, we can over restrict to where nobody benefits, right? Like you can own a house in a neighborhood where you can't have a birthday party because nobody can park. And so we have to look at we have to look at a happy medium, but the issue is that we just don't have the land and the resources are not there to solve this problem, with one fell swoop. So we have to get creative.
We could allow street,
I would
could allow more street parking.
I'm
Well, that too becomes an issue because again, the city of Houston doesn't own all the roads. TxDOT owns Alameda Road, which is a major thoroughfare, right? And if they say they have to shut down, it's a highway, it's a state highway, just like OST is a state
West
highway.
Summer.
Yeah, but anything with a FM or a US, they're farm roads, state roads. And so we can't tell them what to do with their highways. What they can say is, okay, you're in this, well, it runs through your city, we can give you this time, but before 6, we're shutting it down because our highway has to do what it does. And so, yes, the street parking is available during the hours beyond that, but then there's not a solution for the high traffic times, because people are looking for dinner, people are looking to do activities between 4 and 6. So where do those cars go? Right, so street parking, it works in certain areas, there's street parking along Alameda, Emancipation, but there's not enough. And so then what happens? And again, they spill into the neighborhoods, and then the neighbors are upset, and then the neighbors go do a RPP, and it's again, over restricted.
And I guess, Peter, to kind of touch on what you're asking about these plans, I'm thinking as we're talking and like, I don't think I have seen a plan that's been set out that I feel like it's been successful. I feel like there's been a lot of attempts and there's been a lot of money, man hours put in plans. With the money, we probably could have solved some of the problems and issues that we had going on. Informing the Third Real Estate Council, and just doing the research just on these 3 square miles of Third Ward, we probably found 20 plus plans just on this area going back to like the 90s. And all of them, I guess, are sitting on something, they all said the same thing, right? They touched on parking, they touched on corridor revitalization, they touched on housing, all the key components is whatever the case is. There are a lot of community members out with brain drain kind of put into it, a lot of public sector hours put into it. But all of them, it seemed like kind of have been sitting. I think the one that I probably can point to, which is probably more housing related, is the Southeast Affordable Housing Plan. I feel like it's at least referenced, but even in that, I don't think it hasn't rolled out, so to speak, in the same way that it was intended, which happens, but that's something that it's kind of difficult to deal with. At least for me on my end, I feel like, especially when it comes to the corridors, because of how important they are, they really kind of, I like to say, kind of tells the health somewhat of a neighborhood. Most folks that are from here or not from a neighborhood, you are driving through it, and all you're going to see most time is the corridor. So if all you see is parking lots, or all you see is vacant buildings, so on and so forth, you tend to either you think I'm not going to stop, or here's all I can stop for here, or whatever the case is. So where I'm going is that I think that it comes with plans. I think if we can be a little bit more focused on like something visual that developers, builders, investors, so on and so forth can pour into, that has been informed by everyone somewhat, that could be really helpful, because a lot of what we're saying here are just a lot of words, so to speak. Or earlier, Garland, it's a lot of technical. 80-90% of us, we need show me what it needs to look like, so to speak. So
Also, one plan that I think it's all an experiment, right? Can't say we've done it, but it's helped make our vision for the corridor possible, which is the work that the Livable Places Ordinance did in the last administration. And we got some laws changed to give us the COD, walkable places, and market-based parking, and that is the only reason this corridor project and the neighborhood fund and this effort is possible. Like we would pick 3 or 4 of these historic buildings in the corridor that would have been torn down for surface parking lots. So it's allowing this sort of attempt to create a connected walkable corridor to happen. And I think what's missing in terms of like let's do some deals, let's make some stuff happen. there's a need for, I mean, we need to like reimagine something, anything between what the townhome model is and everything else. There's like an entire mixed bag of housing topology from like stacked flats, from like small scale. You can reinvent the townhome and just get rid of the garage in the front and put the alleyway in and make that a little shop. But that reinvention requires people like us working with like good builders that like maybe would have built some townhomes. Because those are the entrepreneurial people that are like going out and pulling a loan for 2 or 3 or 4 units. And like we've got this corridor where there's going to be complete street and all these like we've done some like design planning work on the site that's like there would have been like 8 townhomes where you could get 70, 80 stacked flat courtyard apartments. Or you could take a site where, you know, there would have been a townhome, all front loaders killing the corridor, like just destroying the front. The townhome is like the absolute enemy to this sort of work because it just destroys the connectivity. So we have to think about cultivating entrepreneurial builders or people that want to be in this world that are willing to like push their designers and push their investors to like take some small risks, like small scale, like 2, 3, 4 unit risk. So that's where like there's a need, and there's not in Houston, no one doing that work today. So we want to work with those people, whether it's partnering.
I got a question. So we want to do small scale commercial, but the city's rules are more geared towards large scale commercial. So how do you overcome that? Like I would love to build live work units.
Yeah.
The city permits them through commercial permitting.
The city makes it impossible.
Yeah.
I mean, like to do this sort of work, like you're building like a strip center in 1960, great.
Oh yeah, you do that all day.
This stuff is hard. So you have to like almost, you have to be smart about how you permit it. And you have to like design the storefront and design it for, I mean, no one in the history of Houston has ever been arrested for going to work in their own home. Like no one's gonna go to jail for working in their own home, but you have to think about how you permit it. Like we've looked at using the 504 SBA product, which is, it lets you borrow 110% the appraised asset value, and it's 15 or 20%. You know, it's good. It's normal commercial paper day is 7 and 9%. You can get a 6.25 loan on a straight line 20-year amortization. And I think somebody could figure out how to use that 504 product to create small scale live work. Or mixed use, you know, basically using sticks and bricks like a townhome product. But you have to be like, yes, you're right, because the 504 would say permitted all commercial, and then they're like, you're like, I want to live in my home and I want to get the benefit from it. So you have to condominiumize it. You'd have to build a condo on top of the shop. I mean, it takes this sort of creativity, but no one's gonna ever be going to jail for living in their house and working in their house.
What I think something we kind of took straight past is one of the reasons we started the council, the Thorough Real Estate Council, is to have more collaboration. One of the things that I noticed is that a lot of us, we are doing our work, but we are doing it independently, period, right? We're not coming together and kind of problem solving together. We had Jim Hyde was here last week. I think it's a good resource to talk about live work and different things like that. The folks that we can bring here and have these forums, have these kind of charrettes and things like that. But there's also going to talk to the city behind more than just like your company. They don't care about in that sense, right? But when I say talking behind something, means getting behind, you know, not just necessarily our organization, I'm biased towards it, of course, but like there's several others in town, right? Collectively, it's one of the reasons this year we've kind of leaned to what we leaned into. I reached out, I plugged everybody. List, the APA, C&U, Strong, I went down the line calling folks. I need you guys in the room. I want you guys around so that we can identify what are hurdles, and then I want to work with them, right, to work through them. I don't want to leave this weekend necessarily and you go back to what you're doing saying, I'm trying to figure it out. You don't have excuse now, right? None of us do in a sense. You know, and then I think there's another part of this is my pet peeve. You know, when it comes to working together, it does not fall on one person in the organization. And one of the things I get from a lot of us and our peers that we're doing this work is we're all busy, and I may call, and I'm not saying it's you, Jeff, but this Jason, let me know what you need. I'm calling you. That's what I need, right? Let's get in the room. Like this is not me or Garland kind of just leading charge. We all have to lead in some fashion. So I think more I say that just because it's been a thorn in my side, so to speak.
Yeah.
But we don't have this groundswell of small scale development here in Houston. And until we kind of bear down, slow down a little bit and create it, I don't think the city's gonna take it as serious because everything's bigger.
Totally. I think there are a few ways we need to work together immediately, and I think the city will go along if they see that there's a market for this sort of work. The challenge is pre-development. I mean, it's impossible to get through the time and the cost of doing entrepreneurial pre-development work. That's why Lauren builds the same meat and pork out townhome, because it's expensive. So we were this close to getting this funding that was going to go through CDFIs, and this was there was about 900. There was like 900 billion. It was $900 million in these climate justice funds that were going to fund this sort of work, and they were going to do concessionary financing, recusable loans for small scale developers to try this exact sort of product. And the money is like city bank account, the treasury suing them, they're stopping it. This was going to go to like local neighborhoods and local communities to like introduce this. So it stopped. So Houston is this like incredibly philanthropic city, but like we make our money in very traditional ways. So we're philanthropic, and then so there's no ecosystem here for impact finance or to do this sort of community equity and community wealth. We've tried. So I think that if we can figure out a way to approach the larger foundations that could set up a Houston bank to do this sort of entrepreneurial urban impact lending and financing, and they would need a counterpart. They would need, like, they could do it through a CDFI or through a local partner. But I mean, we've talked to them, we've heard chatter of it, and I think in this moment when the government is not able to take on, they're absconding from responsibility in American cities. And I think there's a chance for Houston as a city to lead. The most inspiring thing I've ever heard anyone say about our city, and then I'm going to shut up, is the guy that wrote this book about why America is so divided, Ezra Klein. He writes for the Times. He wrote a book about why cities are so divided. And I was in San Francisco in the Mission at this bookstore called Manny's, hearing him present this talk, present his book. And prior to the talk, he said that the key to reducing division in the United States is upzoning. And somebody raised their hand. They're like, "What does upzoning mean?" And he said, basically, Houston is the city that can figure out how to create inclusive models for neighborhood development faster than any other city in the Western world, because they're already the most diverse, multicultural, especially for younger people. They just need to fix their parking codes, and they can move faster to figure out how to do this. But other cities are locked in these decade-long zoning battles. So we can figure out how rich and poor can live together to create this sort of community equity faster than other cities. We need that bank. We need that bank. Houston needs to have that bank. It's worked in other cities, but we don't have that bank here. It's so important for this to happen. So we need to align. I mean, there's organizations that, and a lot of philanthropies are increasing from 3% to 6% their annual giving because of what's happening in the federal government today. So we have to be really smart and strategic to align and ask with the 20 largest foundations to start a bank to fund this sort of work.
We need to push the academic sector to kind of produce the research for them.
Maybe so.
That's what.
Yeah, just make note for so they can see the impact. I mean, you see what happened there. That happened because of that, and there can be more of that, and it can scale, but it takes some structure behind it.
And I think to Jason's point earlier, you talked about all the studies, right? The one thing that I won't do with the district is do not present another study opportunity to me, right? I don't.
Yeah.
Don't-
No,
don't- Yeah, everything is, so we have a couple of things that are being done now, and they're all implementation. Any consultant that comes to the district that asks to do anything with a study, no, I need you to take these 15 studies that we've done over the last 22 years and find a implementation plan for these things to go forward. We did the OST Palm Center Livable City Study, Livable Places Study, Livable Center Study with HCAT. And it's a study, but my consultants were charged with making it an implementation plan. And typically we have 15 to 20 years to implement these things in the plan. And for us, as soon as we finished our plan, we were already at 40% of implementation of these projects. We had funding in place, we had work on the ground. And so I was very serious about making sure that we don't have any more studies. Everything is implementation. Because every neighborhood in our district has study fatigue. Everybody's, OST, third ward, like, nobody wants to go sit and send and shoot QR codes all day for nothing, right? Because they don't see it. And I agree, don't bring me another survey, right? Let's deal with the data we have already that we've not done anything with. Because people have outlived these surveys and these studies, right? And some have gone on and saw nothing happen. And so again, at least while I'm here, I only want implementation and action. What you're speaking to is absolutely correct. There does need to be a unique funding source to address some of these things. But you also have to have agencies, much like a management district, much like public entities and also private entities that back this thing from their vantage point, right? Management districts are a lot like entrepreneurial government.
Mhm.
There are some
Yeah.
things that we can do, there are some things we cannot do,
Yeah.
but we know how to fill those holes.
Yeah.
And so when we're talking about strategy and being able to solve a problem, Jason, you can't be calling and people say, well, what do you need? Because they don't have the time, or they perceive they don't have the time to do the work. A lot of this stuff is not, full day conversations. It literally is, okay, hey, we have this one thing we need to navigate. I need your input
We
so
all
we
have a piece, yeah.
so we can get this done. But again, the illusion of not having the time is the problem. So when are we ever gonna have the time? We have to make the time. And so when we think about corridors like emancipation and, Amita and other ones, we have to decide, what is our shared goal and shared mission, right? What problems are we trying to
Right.
solve? And then we can get people to do the research. I mean, there's students at Rice, at U of H, at TSU, who are willing to do this work as a part of their effort. And again, it doesn't take us to take the time to study, right? But really put some people who are focused on the efforts of changing the culture, right? Of transportation, of housing, and of the collective in Houston, but also willing to do the work as the development community, small scale development community, the political community all work together to provide solutions. And so I think that's part of what we're missing is, again, that focused effort. And we thank you for the Third Ward Real Estate Council. But again, and many have fizzled because of wanting to do it in a silo.
Yeah.
The difference is we don't. And I think that scares people. Again, it scares people because, and I'll because she said accounting earlier. The funniest thing to me is that people are afraid to share their lives, right? I can tell you your whole life by looking at your bank account, but nobody wants to share that. But if you're going to have a business, if you're going to do anything dealing with money, somebody has to be able to navigate that for you. You need financials, you need all those things. It's the same thing with development and collaborative work. You're gonna have to be transparent, right? Where you have a weakness, someone else has a strength. Yeah. And you can't be afraid to say, hey, I can get funding with them because of X, Y, and Z. Maybe you can, right? And so it really is a strategy and putting having a level of trust and making sure that there is something that there's a shared goal and everyone understands their part in it.
Totally, yeah, it creates surprising partnerships. I mean, you need surprising partnerships. I can never, ever check the the finance boxes of my team. I have two partners that are amazing, and I'm grateful for them. I would be completely helpless.
But you have to.
Yeah, I would be miserable. But Jason, I have a question for you. For your vision for this quarter to happen. you know, there's all these disparate owners that are siloed, like what needs to happen right now? For this consortium, for that team to exist, where you have everyone kind of doing their role, but everyone's focused on that same vision. Where are we right now? Where are you right now? Not we. Where's this group?
Right here.
Yeah. What needs to happen?
No,
right
no,
now?
I'm saying we right here.
So there will be something next.
So, no, I'm saying-
Next, like we're here, right?
What's next is, the two things that we have focused on, and it's part of why we want to have this dinner this evening with panelists and different folks, is around funding, right? Creating that fund, you know, even if it's not as big and citywide and stuff like that, but we have to start something that's small, that's just focused on one corridor or certain types of projects to start. There's that conversation there, but again, it's having a very difficult conversation, being transparent about where we can pour into that, who can actually support it. And then two, it is addressing some of the different policies. So for us specifically, I know on your end, your neck of the woods, you guys have been able to buy big warehouses and stretches of, you know, big parcels. But we don't have that same thing housing or corridor wise here, right? Some of these corridors are, you know, we have a property that's 5,000 square feet. That doesn't fit the typical commercial property of today, so to speak. So, right. So it's talking to the city or again, collectively putting things like this together when we're watching to share with them to say, hey, here's some things that we need to address to be able to even use the properties that we have on our corridor in some way, right? We don't on 5,000 square feet, you know, I can't build a restaurant. You know, if I have to have 4 to maybe 10 parking spaces, you know, for every 1,000 square feet potential, like, what am I gonna do with it, right? That's what's there. They're just gonna sit and collect weeds for the next 20 years. So it's kind of addressing those things, and I think that's low hanging fruit because I want to believe that the city wants these spaces activated, paying back taxes, walkable, so on and so forth, especially on this corridor since they have designated it as a walkable place, they have designated it as a TOD. I just don't think they've had enough of us to come to them and say we want to actually do. So it's pairing the money with the willingness right now, Jeff. That's what I would say.
Is there a new product type you want to explore or try that you haven't, or do you
No,
know?
this is not, I don't think this is product type. You know, we say a fund, this would be something more like a revolving fund that we talked about
Yeah.
Friday, but more so to pour into acquisition and some pre-development.
Right.
Just to kind of bridge things and get to the lenders.
Yeah, that's it. So I mean, Dallas, you know Monty Anderson is. He worked on starting that sort of fund there to help local merchant businesses do pre-development, buy their building, or invest in their, you know, in a building so they can stay. Which is important to create this sort of community equity, like having some alignment between the business ownership and property, because you know you need some of that.
So, and I agree with you. And so our district is funded through commercial properties, right? People have to opt in to pay us a special assessment to do the work that we get to do. Now, the person who's in the
I got out. I got out.
you could, but the majority will opt in. And but so what happens is, you know, they opt into, they sign a petition to be assessed to pour into the work that we get to do. But from the money that we get, we leverage it into hundreds of millions of dollars to make sure that the area get what it deserves. So our assessment is only like $4 million a year for 32 square miles of the city. You do the math, right? And so there's not a lot, but we take what we have and we are able to grow it and multiply it by having good strategy and good fundraising and fund development partners. I wanted to say that when we talk about leveraging, right, commercial property, people who are business owners may not own the property that they're working in. And if the owner of the property or the building does not have an interest, right, to make it look better or to make the investment, the business ultimately suffers, right? We deal with this on so many levels. We have a grant program that is, for facade improvement. We even have one for demolition to get rid of blighted properties so that we can look toward the future. But commercial property owners are not, a lot of them are not taking advantage of what we have to offer because they don't have a vision themselves. So it really is, okay, I'll just pay this assessment, pay my taxes, and I'll let the building rot. Whereas you have people like Jason, you have other folks like, hey, we could do X, Y, and Z in this space, and they're like, oh, no, we don't want to do that because it's gonna cost too much. They don't have a vision for the potential return. Either because it's a generational debt, or you have the children of those who either don't live here, have no interest, and don't realize that there is a value and viable property here in the area that could really turn millions if they did it correctly.
Yeah, that's interesting. One thing that we struggled to tell when we, worked on raising this urban impact fund was the value of that sort of community equity or place. And because the best businesses that where you feel that it's like a third place are like Doshi House and places like Cafe Brazil where the owner has kept investing. They own the building over time, they bought it. And it creates this value to the neighborhood that's not something that finance people are good at measuring.
Yeah.
But it's real. I mean, it's like it's off pro forma normally. And that comes from having I feel like there should be some sort of proximity incentive, like between developers go to the city and negotiate these things called community benefit agreements because they're always asking the city for help for projects. And the city has more tools at their disposal to there's been conversation about this, but you can imagine a world where these community benefit agreements incentivize for a portion of the businesses to be, proximate to the neighborhood or from the neighborhood. It could be there's a way to create that sort of community wealth by proximity as an incentive when you're getting incentives, not as a requirement. Houston works best with incentives, I think.
We have to scale for that. I think a lot of the tools the city has, again, just as we talked about housing earlier, those tools are for big.
Right.
If I'm creating hundreds of jobs, if I'm creating 5,
right, totally.
Right.
That is that
Right,
count?
totally.
It seems like they're not going to do that on your own. Right, okay, well, we're gonna let we'll just let the property sit there.
Right, and that's the thing, we have spectators, I always think people are interested, and then we have those that are invested, right? The interested parties that buy the property and hold it, right? And they don't care about anything else, the invested ones are the ones pushing for things to actually happen.
100%. What this bank I think should do, and there has been chatter about it, there just hasn't been organization. It's to help merchant-owned businesses buy their real estate, either through a 504, because it creates value. Because it's the best form of micro neighborhood economic development to do this sort of thing. I am such a believer in the power of third places, and we are lacking it. We have so few places that make you feel safe today. Does everyone know what a third place is?
Third place.
So there's a private space, we're in a private office right now, and there's a public space which is like a park. A third place is a publicly driven, publicly representing business that is a part of the fabric of that location. You can't move it. It exists at that neighborhood, at that intersection. Doshi House is of that location, and it is serving that community and in that place. You couldn't just move it, right here across the street. You can't just move that and go put it in Katy or the Woodlands, of a neighborhood. Those places create the magic sauce for economic development. And there's never been a developer toolkit or a city making toolkit that values how to engender third place. I mean, you were a third place,
Right.
and will be again. There's never been a toolkit to understand the economic impact of third places. I was part of starting. I was co-founder of Axelrad, and developers would advertise their apartments are 4 blocks walking distance. And it's because capital markets consider real estate to be the safe asset class, and all the cool shit and lovely, independently run businesses that are part of a community that make you want to be in a neighborhood, the risk falls on the merchant. So there needs to be alignment for stability in neighborhoods between the merchant and like, you can't keep investing in a space. Has everyone been to it's the weirdest and coolest bar in downtown Houston? It's called Natsua. It's like the ultimate third place. Yeah, I had some friends in town. It's like the owner bought that building for like nothing in the 90s, and he just kept reinvesting in it. And it's like, I mean, he programs it every day, but he's like, I would never have been able to do this, but I have ownership in it. So like finding ways, like specific locations where we can work to get some third place businesses financed is so important.
Yeah,
It's so important.
and I agree, and as we talked about, just, all these things in transit in relation to that. The biggest thing is, yes, we need to get them the resources, right, so that they can be a staple in the community. But we also need to make sure that when people, as the community changes, people can get to them, right? Because, it's great that, Crumville was right across the street and that there was a parking lot, but when there was construction, there was no parking lot, and so people had to figure out how to get there. Right, as things change. Or parade. Right, any activity park adjacent made it difficult for her to do business if people were not walking. And so we have to look at, beyond, I guess, kind of look at the effect, right, of all these things, so that as we are talking about different things, that we are solving backwards, right? We're solving for growth. And so we're looking beyond the immediacy of things and saying, okay, how does this impact her in, 10, 15 years, right? What does this place look like in 10, 15 years? Maybe this is something that we get off the ground and make happen. And then even having that uncomfortable conversation, are you prepared to sustain yourself for 10, 15 years as this thing changes? What does that look like for you? And those conversations are hard to have, but they're real. You have to have them because, of course, like even with, our current state of affairs in the US, like we have to be able to prepare for these shifts in ways that, it will require us to do something different, but it doesn't mean we can't do it better. And so we really have to plan long term. I think I was talking to Peter earlier because I always look at the long game. Like, yeah, right now it's pissed me off, but 5 years from now it's not going to be the same. So I play the long game, and we have to do that when we speak to development, transportation, anything. It's always the long game, because what impacts you today won't be the same problem we have tomorrow. Let's start with you said, but we won't have those same issues. Thankfully, at least.
I'll be interested in seeing, I'll be open to like some type of overlay district for like certain areas to really incentivize specific things. And maybe that's a place where our terrorism of the city can actually put some dollars in, or not prescribe, but on some level kind of prescribe what needs to happen there. I think that would be helpful.
Can you talk a little bit about what an overlay district is, or rather what an ideal overlay district would look like? Because by some definitions, the walkable place along Emancipation is an overlay district.
It is.
Clearly, that's not mission accomplished in the community that you're trying to accomplish there. So,
so an overlay. So we already have them. I feel like. Huh? Yeah,
District.
we already have, essentially it's just a boundary, a defined area that comes with some set of rules, incentives, for it, so on and so forth. So we already have them here. So whether it just be your management district boundary, or the walkable places pilot area, so on and so forth. But I think what we don't have though is, there's no form to it. And when I say form, meaning Emancipation is a walkable place, but right behind us there are townhomes on the corridor in an area that most people don't have cars. Most people need jobs. We can't put a business there. And the people that are coming to the park can't necessarily come and patronize anything. And then more importantly, from a design perspective, it's probably like one window, right? It's just you walking past walls, three-story, 4-story walls, pretty much. So nobody's interested in that necessarily. But there's nothing that what I hear a lot of times is that gonna say I can't do it. Well, maybe it should. Right, maybe it should.
So a few years ago, probably before COVID, we worked on a developer framework, right, years ago. And we talked about the things that we did not want to see on our walkable corridors. We had a conversation with a developer and he was like, yeah, this is not my development model, right? I don't really care about walkable aesthetics. I don't care about landscaping. I don't care about any of that. I want.
It was anti.
Right, he was like, yeah.
Having a difficult conversation.
Yeah,
Anti.
and I was like, well, I said, what do you go home to? 'Cause I'm a creep, right? I was like, what do you go home to? Right? Literally go home and walk out of your back door and you go to a walking trail that leads to a pond
Right, yeah.
and a fountain and
Yeah.
parkland, you know? I said, and that is your choice. I said, but you come here and, you know, you wanna put up a prison, right? Nobody wants that.
Right,
And so he had a hard time getting his project completed, but I explained to him that had you thought about the people in the neighborhood as comparable to your neighbor, right, and yourself, why build something that you would wanna live in? And so when we talk about, again, the interested, right, and the invested, the people who are building here are not living here, right? And so they build, they leave, and we're left with a bunch of things that it's like, okay, there's no grocery store. So you have these 8 townhomes and they have to drive.
that's so true.
to go get something.
They get fresh, then they see the neighborhood is just rental.
Eventually, it's just blighted property.
Yeah.
And so when we talk about the progression of these things, I'm really big on, where's your heart? I don't care that you can develop and build pretty things, that's great, but where's your heart? Because again, someone's grandmother lives here, so her kids go to school here, may not be yours, but how do you intend to leave this neighborhood better than you found it? I've dealt with the same thing in South Park, Sunnyside, OST, South Union, like, what is your goal here? Is it to make $1? Don't come here to make it, right? And again, I'm a creep, right? And so when it comes to that, don't come here to make that $1. Because again, the people who live here, who work here, have businesses here, won't be able to turn that same $1 because the person that is buying here is not gonna shop, right?
Well, it's
There's nowhere to shop, where would you shop?
Right, there's nowhere.
Where do the people who live in this neighborhood shop, go for groceries or for gas?
Right.
typically?
Right,
You know what I mean?
and these are the things that we
HEB
have
is
to,
stuff.
yes. HEB is the closest, and then, yeah, but it's small.
Yeah.
And then the HEB that was the highest income producing, they had a whole high loss section too, but they fed like, it was the one on Scott Street, right? But you had to, but you had to think about too, the senior citizens use that.
Right.
And so
It was
HEB
successful.
they had to put that money into transportation to get them.
Yeah.
That's so interesting.
Instead of leaving that one there, which is now, I don't know what the building is or what it does. It's like,
No, it's a.
Planet Fitness. Planet Fitness.
okay, and so let's talk about that. You want people to be healthy who can't eat correct, eat right, right? What are we saying? You
I don't
know,
know.
I'm not saying.
No.
I'm saying don't do it.
The challenge with all development is that there's no access, there's no barrier to entry to be a developer, it's access to money.
Right,
There's no barrier, so we
but
need a
that's
few.
with everything.
But well, yeah, but what's real is being accountable and committed to a community, like, with the way you're committed to this community in this corridor. That's something definable, like you are working in a proximate area to a community that you're accountable to and building your livelihood and life around. So I think that the incentive could, like, I have this thought that like Houston could invent some sort of proximity code. There's no other city that has it. It would be an invention, like we have to write a new story right now.
Yeah.
We're stuck. We have to create a new story for community equity, community. We have to write a new story. And Houston is like, it's not an accident that Hines became the largest builder in the world and for other sovereign world countries. I heard him say, Houston lets you figure out, for better or worse, this is a freeway model. It lets you figure out how to build faster, quicker, to scale. So we can figure out a new template for community equity in Houston, that like Pittsburgh and other cities, Phoenix will look at. We have to figure something out quickly.
Yeah.
We do. So I think we should invent a proximity code and like take that to the foundations, the 20 foundations. We met with all of them. And they're interested in doing this. And they just assume because I'm white and Jewish that I came from money. And I did it. I swear to I didn't have a dime in my mouth. I was like, they assume they're like, we want to fund developers that don't have access to capital. So you need a pile of money to go do this.
Why you didn't call me?
No, I'm just saying, because, no, I'm just like, I'm just saying. So, but I'm no, really, like, there is interest, but we have to organize a way to ask. There's 25, like, they actually tried to start doing it, they just don't know where to go and how to do it. They need organization, like, they need, but there's a very moment to strike and like get these groups to start it.
Well, Jeff, I'll say this, the biggest part is the compelling story, right? That has to be captured,
Right,
has to be captured in a way that somebody wants to pay to solve the issue. And if
Yeah.
it cannot aggregate that story, right?
right,
Then the 20 foundations don't matter. And then you
Right.
go talking to them, doesn't matter. Jason trying to do something else, all doesn't matter, right? We have to aggregate that story, right? It doesn't matter if you're Jewish, doesn't matter if you're Black, doesn't matter if you're Asian, whatever the case may be. We all have the same issue, right? It's not driven by those metrics. It's driven by the goal to solve this problem in this area.
right,
And this can be duplicated across the city, right? It has to be something that they can be proud to put their name and their money behind, that can stamp a solution and then also be duplicated in other areas, right? They have to see it at scale.
totally.
Well, isn't
So-
the story out there though? So, I mean, like you said.
But who's telling it though?
No, we're not talking,
No.
No,
it's not.
nobody's telling the
It's talking
story.
about the
This data,
solution.
this data.
There's data, but nobody's telling the story. Nobody is, there is no, and for lack of a better, there is no script, right? That people are saying the same things in the same way, then coming together
Right.
and collectively.
Language is so powerful.
It's saying it's saying it from the vantage point of, okay, I'm a small scale developer. And again, like the assumption is, okay, I've been doing this, I'm advocating for this, it's a fight, right? I'm fighting for this. Whereas, Jeff's story or his method may be, okay, my fight is different. It's not space or land or, or dollars per se, but it's, changing what's required so that I can continue doing what I'm doing. My fight is a little different. So everybody's fighting, but we're fighting in different ways. But if the aggregate story is the fight is the fight, and every piece of the fight is valuable, and we're working together to fight together, then it starts to move in a way where there's power. Right now, there's not enough power behind the need, in a way that makes people want to put dollars behind it and also change policy, right? And so I always say that we are stuck in this city in the unique intersection between policy, preference, and people, right? We have people who are dogged and passionate. We have policies that sometimes suck. And the preference, right? Again, if I'm a developer, I don't have to follow their rules, so I'll do what I want. If, it could be the preference of the landowner. I'm not selling, but I'm also not gonna do anything. So preference can kill so many amazing visions, but we have to decide how we're gonna face it or how we're gonna approach it in a collective narrative where people wanna get behind it and they want to help solve this problem. Right now, they're just here but chat.
Is there
an existing collective though, is there an existing collective that like a group of people will get together and can handle this on a micro level? Because everybody's talking about the funding and the projects are for large projects. So is there not a collective that can attach this at a micro level? And that we can get behind, or is it already in existence and we just don't know about it? Is it not in existence?
So how many nonprofits are in third ward? How
How
many churches are in third ward? There is not a collective.
Not a collective.
It is, you piss me off, I'm gonna start my own. And it's territorialism, right?
Yeah.
And then when I get tired of it, I sell it to someone who doesn't have the same mission or the same interest, and who wants to then profit off of what was initially started for the community and sustained by the community, right? Everything is siloed and segmented. So no, there's not necessarily a collective, right? I think what Jason is doing is trying to start that and get the motion behind it, but we don't have that. And even as a management district, our district, years ago, it was the tagline was one place, 7 places to be, one district. Yes, 7 places, one place to be. Why would you even do that?
Yeah.
Right? Why would you say we're divided but we're together? Like that's wild.
Yeah.
And then that becomes again territorialism. Like it starts to put those 7 places together to compete for resources, to compete for visibility, to compete for interest. Whereas we are one district, right? we have shared goals, we have shared issues. And whereas one, like we have Museum Park in our district, one of the biggest things in Museum Park is preservation of historic trees, right? In Third Ward, there is a desire to serve historic trees, but not in the same way because we don't have as many in Museum Park, right? But everybody needs sidewalks, right? What can we universally agree on? Where even if you have your special thing that needs to be fixed, what can we agree on as a district that needs to be solved district-wide and not make it about me or my individual location? Is there a collective? No. Are there people with the same hearts and who want to solve the same problems? Yes. Do those people sit in the same room every day or at any time? No.
How do we get them in the room?
Yeah, I
Well,
think that that's a
this
good
is-
place
this is
to
How do we
try
get them
and
in the
tie a bow
room?
on all this.
So
You know?
this is the good start.
Yeah, I mean, I think some interesting stuff could come out of this. I mean, I've been thinking for a while that we need to write new code.
Yeah.
From Houston, like we have an inferiority complex as a city where like, what did New York do? What did Dallas do? Like, let's lead, let's fucking lead, like, let's write something new. We have to write something different. So I think that there's a few things that like if Houston can be aware that it has a chance to lead. And like we have this diverse city that look, it's hopeful place, like we're the next American city, we're just missing these corridors. If you have a carrot and a stick and these benefit agreements that every developer asks for, it says 15% of your businesses need to be local or something like that. Then you have an incentive for procurement, for permitting, and then you have a bank set up to lend and finance towards that community equity committee wealth that stabilizes it. You have to create it's like you need both. You have to be your own lobbyist almost. But I really think that Houston, like we could like write something new. Like we could be the first city in the country to have a proximity code. Yeah. And like there's a way to do this stuff right now that has just not been tried. And this really is a moment to try new thought.
It
really is. Like, don't feel like we have to look around. We can come up with native indigenous thought in Houston that is representing like the fact that the country is so divided more than it ever has been. We have to write something different.
I think we're landing on this desire to establish sort of unifying attribute or collective around say a proximity code or an overlay district or something like that. Just to get real specific, if y'all could each mention like one or two things that would be elements of that would be in that proximity code that you think that everybody could get behind. You mentioned the 15% locally owned business.
Something like that. I want to apologize for cursing. I get really passionate.
That's okay.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I've never done that when I was speaking. But I'm really passionate and we need this to happen. I think specifically, I think that we should like draft, like it would be cool for Jason to like, when you have, the pedigree to draft some ideas on what that could look like. And I think we take that too, like we talk to like the top, 5 foundations. We met with a lot of them. I mean, we were hoping that they would look at like what this sort of work is an impact investment, and there is no ecosystem for it. I think taking them this idea for proximity code and investing around it in corridors could help, and it could help unlock the structure of what that sort of urban impact fund or financing could be like. But I think there's it's a handful of players in Houston that could be interested in that. But I think we need both. You need the policy and you need the financing. You need both.
And how does that impact though, tying into the panel earlier, the hurdles with the city?
So that I guess that's where I was gonna go. Why tie in with the that is driven or more sway to more small scale style, commercial and residential. I think that'll kind of weed out a lot of the quote unquote bad players, because it's not a space they want to be in necessarily. And it'll help kind of support those that do want to be there.
Right.
One of the things, and I kind of got to sitting down with different developers. I'm like, well, what could I do to get you to do this in this way? Money, that was the first thing, right? What is the money attached to? So I think that's a very big thing. So if you're in this zone and you are building this way, that there is some type of economic incentives there for you. Funding, period.
and public funding or from?
Both.
I think it's public support, but I think it's program, it's PRI money,
Yeah.
impact based. It's like,
I would
it's,
say both.
it's both. You gotta have both,
Mhm.
for sure. But you need private money to like get their attention, get the city's attention. To write this new proximity code, you need to know, like, there is a specific guidance to allow this sort of community equity to happen. And there's a bank behind it, and then the developers will be, like, they will be there. Like, once that pile of money is there to go do the pre-development and to like reinterpret how we create entrepreneurial work. You know, for merchant businesses to, you know, be aligned with the real estate, there will be projects.
Yeah,
There's no one covering pre-development financing today.
yeah, and it can't be
Doesn't do this.
elusive like the opportunity zone situation.
Oh,
Right?
yeah.
It has to be something immediate, right, where people can actually feel it, right, when it's happening. I would say, for that to be effective, for this code to be effective, we have to have a group of business owners who are willing to disclose what they need, right? Disclosure is the hardest thing to get from people who are in it day to day, right? Because for the outside world, it looks like it's working, right? And so when you are an entrepreneur, there are things, you know, and I tell anybody, entrepreneurs are the bravest people in the world because they take risks that other people can't or will not take to provide a service to people that they may or may not get, right? And so when you have that group, understanding what they need from that proximity, because right now we have businesses in our district that they're closed. They by day they're neighborhood eateries, by night they are, you know, troublemakers to those who live, right? So we have to understand like really what that need is, because by day they're great neighbors, but at night, you know, it's like, okay, I can go eat lunch there, but at night I can't sleep, right? So how do we navigate that? How do we make sure that there's opportunities for day to night transition for the needs of the business owner, but also for those who are in proximity to still have a quality of life, right? So again, we have so many intersections and things that we need to cross-pollinate for proximity, right? What does that look like? What does that value of proximity look like to a homeowner, a business owner, and a developer, right? And how do we, and for the public space, right? How does that work, and how do we create synergy in an ecosystem that actually has a good return? So for me, it's the business owners making sure, and the residents, making sure that people we understand what their needs are. And not put something in place that ultimately, yes, have, you know, people living here that may patronize, but you still aren't, you know, making the revenue. You still aren't able to, you know, have a safe, secure business, right? What do you need in order to be a part of, you know, this ecosystem of small scale development, and also what type of return would you like to see? Because it's great in theory, but how do we make it practical?
Great conversation.
Yeah.
Sometimes the job of the moderator is just to sit back. I want to make sure that we pause for at least a few questions from the audience. I appreciate people jumping in. I think that makes for a more invigorating panel. If there's any other remaining questions that you want to maybe touch on.
I'll also get one.
You talked about toolkit. Can you expand a little bit more on that? What you want that to look like?
No, for sure. I think, you know, there shouldn't be 2 quarters, there should be a dozen quarters in this thing. And there's a few toolkits that exist, like complete street design. You know, that sort of help create walkable corridors. They create safer streets. And there's predictable economic development around safer streets. And so capital investors look at predictability and where policies making safer streets or trails. So, you know, the failure of, you know, the Midtown was the connectivity, like CBS came in and built a typical suburban store and it killed the connectivity of what was happening there. So people want to know where you can concentrate investment, whether you're a small investor or a small scale developer or anyone. So having a corridor requires like a toolkit where there's policy to protect the urban design, like you were speaking to with the walkable places. And then we could go. I'm saying we need to go above that because this is like, it used to be easy to be an entrepreneur in Houston. Like you could open a restaurant for $200,000 and $250,000. Like people just spend like $1 million to open a restaurant today. And that risk is so high. So having a toolkit where you have some sort of understanding of what is community equity. In other words, maybe the rule is, maybe it's, they can't just move in to take advantage of the policy, like opportunity zone stuff. Maybe they had to live in the community for 2 years. Permanent address, and proximity to where they're gonna buy a building or invest or do something. Maybe that's the code. They have to show that they live there and are committed to that neighborhood, that community, and not another community. They're not just there to make money and like go home to the suburbs, right, to Westview. They're in the community. So that's, I mean, maybe that, and then you have to have financing, a bank, an urban impact fund that is doing, concessionary financing, low interest loans, and this is good for these foundations because they typically give 3%, some are upping to 6%. So instead of them just giving grants, they actually have a self-sustained model where they're bringing it to have impact in line with their mission, but they're not granting it, they're financing or investing in it. So it's an impact bank. That's what I think we need.
Well, I just was trying to clarify, so you're just saying, what you were saying, what's in the toolkit, or like how we're.
He was saying, I know earlier I thought about developing another toolkit. So like, I know, for instance, Dallas has a big toolkit that they're doing on anti-displacement.
Oh, really?
That Builder
Yeah.
Hope. And so a lot of banks have gotten behind that, and I know he has the city like all in, like,
Yeah.
on different projects and programs and things that they're doing right now as well. So that's what I'm just thinking about, like, what does that look like here in the city of Houston, or who can take a lead on something like that? And I know as we're in this space talking about getting people together, and what does that look like, right?
So we have some players. So if you have some colleagues backing and we can get you guys support, I think it's something we could definitely put together. We've been taking note and have, I think, enough input and can gather more, of course. But I think at the end of the day, that is the unified voice. That is the collective, that unified voice that everybody's kind of speaking from. And if it's done well, it informs the leadership, it informs the neighbors, it informs the businesses. We all can get on one accord. But yeah, as it stands, we're struggling. Something we can talk about.
All right, thanks, everybody. I think it's
Right.